I'm Ben Dattner, an organizational psychologist and executive coach based in New York City.
Great. I understand that the title of your presentation at this conference is The Blame Game.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a little bit about what that means?
Mm-hmm. The Blame Game, How the Hidden Rules of Credit and Blame Determine Our Success or Failure is the title of my book. And the reason I wrote the book is because as an executive coach and organizational development consultant, I found that anytime I worked with an individual, team, or organization, inevitably themes about credit and blame, how people were assigning credit and blame, how they were reacting to credit and blame, real and perceived credit and blame for themselves and for others, was a critical determinant in every executive coaching assignment, every team assignment, every organizational consultation. So I began to write this book based on my experiences with meeting clients where they are, again, individuals, teams, and entire organizations, and helping them to think about their patterns of credit and blame. Are they externalizing blame, blaming others too much? Are they taking too much credit on themselves? Are they using credit and blame in a strategic way? Are they being overly emotional? Do they have awareness of themselves and others? And so what I found was, in the course of developing my practice and working on the book, that the two really complemented one another, that I found my work informed my writing, and my writing and research also informed my work.
Okay, great. Can you give me some examples of the early things that you were observing that led to this?
Well, what happened was, I tell the story in my book about a woman who I call Dana in the book, who worked at a hedge fund. And she engaged me privately. Usually companies sponsor the executive coaching engagements, but she was referred to me by a mutual friend. And her issue was, she was an analyst at a hedge fund, and her boss, another woman, perennially stole credit for her good ideas. Whenever an investment went up, her boss, who in the book I call Alexandra, would take credit for the idea. And whenever an investment went down, she would blame Dana. And so in the course of working with Dana several years ago, over the course of several months, I began to think about credit and blame, the personality aspects of it, the relational aspects of it, the organizational aspects of it. And as I began to think about it, I realized it was really a universal theme, that it relates to personality, it relates to emotional intelligence, it relates to self-awareness, it relates to organizational politics, organizational structure, culture, processes, all that kinds of things. And so credit and blame is a very useful frame through which to think about individual personality, the relationships between individuals, the dynamics within teams, the dynamics between teams, and entire organizational cultures. So if I'm working with a CEO, for example, I endeavor to help him or her think about, what do we credit and blame in this organization? Are we crediting and blaming the right things? Are we crediting and blaming the things that we think we're crediting and blaming? Are we crediting and blaming things that might have been more relevant and applicable in the past, but are not the future, emerging disruptive trends in our industry and our business? Einstein said, let me not talk about that. As organizations experience transformational disruption and change, that which has been credited or blamed in the past is not that which should be credited and blamed in the present or the future. So if you're at General Motors in 1977, you're going to be credited for raising the profit margins and market share of large gas-guzzling automobiles. If you're in some corner of General Motors in 1977 talking about hybrid vehicles or fuel efficiency or small, cheap cars, you're not going to be credited for that. You're probably going to be scapegoated and blamed. So when I work with CEOs and management teams, I try to help them think about, what are the emerging disruptive technologies? How might our paradigms be changing? And how do we need to make sure that we're not punishing people who are looking at the future, who are challenging our cherished assumptions, because those might be the people who lead the organization into the future, the very people we should be empowering rather than marginalizing.
Right. That's where the innovators are.
That's right. Innovators are always blamed before they're credited.
Can you tell me a little bit about what you understand about the effects of blame within an organization or upon a particular employee, let's say?
Blame can be very demotivating, and it's been very interesting here at the coaching conference to learn about the neuroscience of some of these dynamics that we see in leadership, in wellness, etc. And blame can literally cause illness. People who feel powerless, people who feel blamed have higher risk of cardiovascular diseases, decreased immune responses. So it really comes down to morale, health, wellness. When you feel blamed for things that are out of your control, accountable for things that you're not empowered to address or to fix, it can be very deleterious to your health and to your mental well-being.
Okay. And on the other side?
Credit can be very positive. It can be very motivational. Our fundamental drivers are self-esteem and social esteem. And when you get credit, when you're acknowledged, when you're cared about, when your contributions and your talents and your intentions are validated, it can be very motivational. It can be some great extrinsic motivation that can make you want to work long and hard in order to make contributions to your organization and in order to be a valued organizational citizen. But if that credit is withheld, if that credit is not forthcoming, if you don't feel appreciated, that can be very demotivated, and you might wonder, why should I bother if nobody cares and nobody even acknowledges what I'm contributing?
Yeah, I have in my mind, and you would know better than me, but seeing some work on the real importance of recognition, and that recognition can often be much more of a motivator than some of the traditional, financial and that kind of stuff.
Definitely. And what leaders are often pleased to find out is that recognition is very cheap to provide, but can go a long way. You can get a very high return on investment of recognition. In between college and graduate school, I worked at Republic National Bank of New York, which is now part of HSBC, and I was the chairman's personal assistant. And as such, I would often give credit to people from his email account to people who had made contributions, gone above and beyond, et cetera. And I would run into them in the lobby the next day, and they would be walking on air. They'd say, "I got an email thanking me from the CEO." And I could just see that they were in a state of complete euphoria. What they didn't know is I had gone into the CEO and said, "Can I thank so-and-so for the Italian translation that she did?" And him saying, "I don't care what you do." But when I sent her the email, she was walking on a cloud.
And he benefited.
Yeah. He did. Didn't cost him anything.
If you were going to go in to coach that CEO who didn't get it, or somebody similar, you might have a better example for me, what would it look like?
Well, it would say, first of all, who are the people on your team? What motivates them? Are you thinking about how to motivate them? Are you acknowledging their efforts? Are you adapting your style? That's one thing that coaches often help leaders do, is to realize that either that which motivates them, the leader, him or herself, isn't going to be motivational to other people, and or that different people on his or her team need to be motivated in different ways. So we try to help them cultivate social intelligence to realize some people might like recognition for their contributions or their talents. Other people might be uncomfortable if too much attention is called to them. So you have to adapt your style to whatever works for the people on your team.
Okay, good. What do you think is next for you as these theories and this work develops?
That's a really good question. Yeah, I think what's really next for me is innovation and disruptive challenges within careers, within teams, within organizations. So to think about, how do we look down the road? How do we look further than the usual 2 or 3 month or 2 or 3 year time horizon that I have in my individual career, that we have as a team, that we have as an organization? What are the emerging things that are just on the periphery that are really not a big deal now, but might become a big deal? And how do we cultivate the organizational awareness of these emerging threats, so that if we're General Motors, we realize that hybrid vehicles are going to come down the pike. If we're Kodak, we realize that digital is going to take over the film business, or whatever that may be. If we're Microsoft, we look at Netscape. If we're Netscape, we look at Google. If we're Google, we look at Facebook. How can individuals in their own careers, because if you're an accountant, if you're a lawyer, there may be emerging disruptive threats on the horizon that you need to think about in order to develop your capabilities and to invest in your own professional development in an intelligent, risk-managing kind of way. So how can you develop that competence for individuals, teams, and organizations to look at distant things on the horizon and to think, even if those little things never become big things, how can we keep scanning for those emerging things and make sure that we're not too wedded to models which might become outmoded or outdated? I give enormous credit to Carol and her team for this coaching conference and the amazing community that she's put together. And it's been really meaningful and enjoyable for me to connect with colleagues from all over the world who are like-minded, open to learning, interested in inquiry. And I've felt a tremendous, very friendly vibe here. So thank you to Carol and her team.
Good. This is your first conference?
Yep.
Well, come back.
I will.